Hello,
Hi,
Terry.
how are you? Hey, this is Queer Chat again.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be back. Happy Friday.
And you are whom?
I am Brian.
And I'm Terry. And we have a great topic. October 11th is National Coming Out Day.
Mhm,
And so in September and the first part of October, we're doing some things to lead up to it.
mhm.
And last week we began discussion and exploration of a model we're developing. We call it the Cromer King model. And it goes over the processes or things through which a person goes, their experiences in the whole of coming out and living our lives uh, in the context of our identity and orientation and such.
Mhm.
The existing models, we've done some research, and the existing models tend to be academic and professional, great for psychologists, that type of thing. This one is personal, and it's designed to show how life is from the vantage point of us and others in our community.
Right.
So we've been asking for feedback, and we've been incorporating feedback into the
Right.
model.
Yeah.
And we've even been changing it as we go. In fact, this is take two of this tape because
Yeah.
we had to stop and do a discussion.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because our model was influenced by something that happened in our Facebook group this week. We have a Facebook group for our church, and someone had posted and sort of asked for prayers in our Facebook group. And so this is sort of what started the whole thing. The person was
Okay.
replying to a Facebook post. And you see these all the time, and it says you can only pick two free things for the rest of your life, and then you put down kind of what you want. And it's free massages, free house cleaning, free gas, free makeup, free alcohol, free pizza from anywhere. And so our friend, who's a transgender woman, but who has a Facebook profile that sort of reflects a sort of that the person is not out of the closet. So the Facebook profile represents is a male Facebook profile, but she
Yes.
put down that for life, she would pick free gas and free makeup.
Okay. And so here's what she said. She said, crap.
And
I
this was a
put an
post
answer
to our
on.
group. Yeah.
Yes, it's within our group. And we are always going to protect uh anonymity. We're not going to out anybody. We're doing this with the person's permission.
Mhm.
So I put an answer on a Facebook page or thing of what two things would you pick for life if you could. I picked free gas and makeup. But here's where the problem comes in. My sister-in-law reacted to it with a wow face. So now I'm super scared. Prayers appreciated. And then also any ideas or suggestions on how to play this off when family asks me about it. I deleted the response, which may have made it worse, possibly. And I love the end. Ugh, why me? This is not good. And then there was in the discussion, the person even more specifically asked the question is, well, what if you know, I don't remember the exact wording, but something to the effect of, what if I tell a fib?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, like I
and
could say the
that type of,
makeup parts for any future wife or girlfriend.
right,
Is what
right.
she said.
So kind of come up with an explanation.
Mhm.
And so as we look at our model, we have some things that relate to this, and this gives us a nice way of explaining it. What hub are we looking at today?
Today we're going to look at what we're calling values, and I think we recognized as we were going through this, and this is why we're on take two, is that values is such a broad concept, and
Yes.
it really does tie in with so many other things. But we really wanted to just focus very narrowly on just a couple of core values that often are in conflict when we are navigating this coming out process.
Can you
And
can you start by telling us what values means?
yeah, so values generally are things that motivate our actions and it help us make decisions. And
Okay.
so that's how we're using the word values. It's maybe a concept. It's a core principle that we hold dear, that we use in order to be true to ourselves, that we use in order to make decisions.
Okay.
Now, on our chart there, we included this whole general idea about meeting needs. And why did we do that, Terry?
Well, we value having our needs met, and we value meeting the needs of others.
Mhm.
That's something that's very important to us, and it does drive a lot of our decisions. Now, when we get to other portions of the model, that will be more specific, and we'll talk about our needs, human needs, like we've got the health needs, and then we have the relationship needs, um, and then community needs. So we'll really get into that more, but we just wanted to identify that that is important to this hub as well.
Right. And
So
so
go
when we
ahead.
were talking earlier, I think we looked at some ideas around the value of honesty. You know, that's saying what I say to you is my word, is my bond, is my truth. And then sort of that juxtaposed with discretion. And discretion is the concept of, well, not everybody needs to know all my business. And then also discretion around, maybe not wanting to cause offense to anyone or not start cause controversy. And then we sort of balance that against authenticity. And I'll let you talk a little bit about authenticity and expression.
Okay, so one can value authenticity, meaning knowing who they are.
Mhm.
And we'll discuss some parts of this later, but um, being able to identify and understand myself and live as who I am. Now, expression is showing that to others. And
Mhm.
so I may value my femininity, and I do. I valued it long before I started dressing in public
Mhm.
and letting people know, long before I legally changed my name and my gender through the court system. Um, so just because I'm authentic does not mean I'm completely expressive.
Right.
And that ties us over, and I don't want to go too far yet, but that ties us to the honesty piece, because part of the question is believing myself and valuing my authentic identity as a woman while wearing male clothing, is that a form of dishonesty?
Mhm.
And so that's where that ties in.
Right.
So do you want to move over to the honesty?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about that. It's and it's interesting. It's something that we face all the time coming out. It, and just even when we're not even trying to come out, just like if someone says, like my husband got a call the other day from someone, and the person was wanting to schedule something. Said, well, will Mrs. Joyner be there? And so, there's that simple question of, okay,
Yeah.
honesty. Well, unfortunately, that's not just an easy question for him to respond to.
Right, right.
Without being misleading, he could say, well, no, she won't be there because there is no Mrs. Joyner. And so that's how he started. And then the person later on was saying, well, I'm sorry that there's no Mrs. Joyner. And so then at that point, he had to say, oh, well, there's not a Mrs. Joyner, but there's a Mr. Joyner. And just really had to kind of explain to the guy. So he was forced with that thing of saying, okay, well, there's no Mrs. Joyner. That's honesty, but that's not disclosing his full self. But then then the question was, well, I'm sorry. This Okay, well now then I've sort of been pushed into that level of disclosure. Um,
And you know, as I relate that to my experience,
mhm.
and tying it into honesty, so we've got this disclosure and non-disclosure question. Um, I began to understand my femininity and to explore it um, without yet coming out to my ex, my spouse at the time.
Right.
And that was all right. In fact, prior to my beginning to accept it, I had tried to fight it. And so I didn't disclose because I didn't want to hurt my ex.
Right.
And so in my mind, that was not being dishonest. It was just not telling her. Um, and, that could be understood as, kind of the same category of a white lie,
Right.
maybe. But when it got to a point that it was a significant enough part of who I am,
Hmm.
that I understood that, then it was a significant part of our relationship. So in my mind, at that point, non-disclosure moved from being honest in an effort to protect her to
Okay.
being dishonest in
Hmm.
not presenting myself accurately in the relationship.
Right. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic at play, because it just shows how this whole process is transitional. And there may be times where non-disclosure at a particular point is completely honest, as you're searching to try and figure out who you are, and how you are called to live your life. Then you're not necessarily, and I think this is where discretion and honesty come into play.
Mhm.
um and it's just very fascinating to me as you look at it at that point, where not being just fully upfront with everything, is really
Forthcoming.
honest, because you don't quite know that yet. But then at some point when you've made up your mind, and I was that way, like with my fiance, of not necessarily telling her when things were happening, but then at some point when I realized, no, I am gay, I am not going to be able to change, it was different. Like
Yeah.
at that point, non-disclosure was not was not right. That just didn't sit right with me.
Yes.
And it wasn't, and I couldn't operate from my values of non-disclosure. I had to move to disclosure.
Okay, so did she feel like when you came out to her that you had lied to her in the past by what you had done?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think that it's a little more complicated, because I had basically come out to her at one point, but I thought at that point that God had really actually changed my orientation.
Hmm.
And so I thought for a while that I was no longer having these feelings of same-sex attractions. So, I think I'd come out to her and I lied and said God has cured me. And so I think that was the lie that she pointed out, that was the lie she pointed back to and said, "You said you were cured."
Now, did you say that as an intentional, cognizant lie?
Well, see, that's the irony there, was I said that fully believing it to be true.
Okay,
So
so
that
commonly we think if I speak what I believe to be true and it's incorrect or inaccurate, that means I was wrong. It doesn't mean I was lying.
right.
I was telling the truth as I understood it at the time.
Mhm.
And it's not that the truth has changed, it's that my perception and understanding of it has.
Mm.
But it doesn't necessarily feel that way to the other person.
Right.
And defending ourselves with that line is kind of perhaps not well received.
Yeah. So I think,
Yeah,
I'm doing some little, like, sort of more thought bubbles on,
yeah,
some of these things, and I'll see if I can change the style to be maybe more like a cloud on that.
okay.
As we look at this and think about, what is truth? What if I believe it to be true? Am I being honest? So I think that's so someone says, "Are you gay?" and you say no, that may not be a lie at that time, because you believe that to be true.
Or you believe that even if you are, you're fighting it and you have reason to believe you'll prevail.
Right.
And so you say no. Okay, now another operative thing in the example we used of our person who uh, put the thing on the little internet quiz.
Right.
Um, and that was around specific versus generalities. because a lot of people answered with, well, be honest in a general sense,
Hmm.
but not specifically. So, for example, um, I responded and I said, you can honestly say, I didn't mean to do that.
Hmm.
Or you could say, oh, that was just a mistake. And it is. He certainly didn't, she didn't mean to disclose. That's where the mistake is. But what I'm leading the person to believe is that the answer that I put was a mistake.
Right.
So technically, the words are accurate and true, but we
Hmm.
are applying them. We have a, it's like, I don't know, what are we doing? Leading the witness?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Again, I think this is one of those things that is it honesty if you tell the truth but not the whole truth, or if you're telling the truth but you're sort of, that you're misleading the person to, maybe think something that is different. Um, so
Yes, and
I
that's,
think that's really interesting.
yeah, and
Um,
that's where the discretion question comes in. But then as we, and we'll talk more about this in ethics, but I want to just surface this. So when I saw this, the first thing I thought of is the most important thing here is safety.
okay.
And if that person is found out, they could be in a position where they are not safe, whether it's physically, whether it's having a home, whether it's keeping their relationships. Um, and so then the question is, can the circumstances mitigate or justify the lie, which is what we commonly say, a little white lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does
And
this dress look good on me? And you just say, oh, babe, look at you.
I think about that as sort of giving then an answer that is, when you're evaluating sort of a short-term perspective on that versus the long-term perspective. Because I have found, and I think I'm sort of thinking about it in a long term of, sometimes if you just, somebody says, "Are you gay?" and you expressly deny that,
Yes.
right? That may be necessary in that moment for safety, but I have found that those sorts of things do come back to haunt you when you do finally come out, because people seem more upset that you lied to them at that point in time, because because they think, well, you said to me, I can't trust you with who I am.
And the only answer you can give, and again, if this is not accurate, then you're just digging deeper. The only answer you can give is, I was at that time growing in my self understanding. And so I couldn't tell you
Right.
fully that I was gay.
Or it might be something though, is, you may be saying to the person, I did not trust you at that time, right? I mean, that you may have known that you were gay, but you may
Yeah.
say, I just don't trust that I can be safe, or that you will not tell someone, or and and I think that's times where, maybe, as if someone, and the problem is, someone asks you that and you have to give an immediate response and you don't have time to machinate on it. But maybe thinking about it in this context is helpful, so in those moments you have an answer and you've sort of thought through things with someone. um,
Yes, but now let me clarify. You said in that moment you don't have time to what?
you don't have time to, like,
What was what
machinate, like, think
machinate?
about it, like, machinate, like run it through your brain and try to figure it out and ponder it and try to figure out, like, what it would be.
I think you're using a $5 word when a 50-cent one would do.
Okay, well, here's
We're getting sidetracked. I'm teasing you about your brilliance
yeah.
and your extensive vocabulary. Machinate. That's not a word I'd used.
All righty, well,
Okay, let's go ahead.
then you make me
Um,
worried, like, is that even a word now? Anyway.
if it's
All right,
used between two people, it is.
there you go.
Um, okay, so in this example, then we have all these factors, And what we've really done in our conversation is we've changed the question. The person said, is it okay to lie?
Hmm.
We've changed it is to, is it essential to be safe? Or
Hmm.
does safety justify lying?
Right.
And
Well, I think we can push the question further of what does it mean to lie,
okay,
right?
now
And,
you're an
and sort of what we're
attorney.
saying is as we look at discretion,
Mhm.
and we have this value of discretion and discretion, we talked about saying, why I don't want people to know my business. So if someone asks me that, I might say, and this is sort of my values, and I get into a discussion with this with my husband Scott about whether or not this is legitimate.
Mhm.
But I feel that if someone asks an improper question, I can give whatever answer I want to, and that's perfectly fine. Like, I'm not lying. If someone says, and I always use the example, and you're always on logical thin ice when you're bringing Nazis into it, but when someone is at the door, when the Nazis are at the door asking Anne Frank's caretakers, do you have a Jewish girl hiding inside your house? And they say no, then I think that's perfectly okay to lie. If someone that you don't even know, if someone just comes up and says, "Are you gay?" I think you can just say, whatever you want. Like, that's none of your business, is really what you're saying. But if
Okay,
you say that's none of your business, then you sort of have answered yes.
right.
So I feel like in that regard, to say no is acceptable ethically, and you're not lying, or it's okay to lie, because I feel like you can give any response is acceptable to a question that should not have been asked in the first place.
Yes, and the only thing I can think of other than what you're saying would be to say something like, well, whether I am or not is an inappropriate question.
And I agree with that, but most of the time people interpret that answer as a
Yeah,
yes to the question.
yeah.
That in and of itself presupposes, I think, the answer to the question, because you didn't
So
want to
if you're
answer the
not
question.
gay, the answer very simply is no.
Right.
One
You
word.
wouldn't feel the need to explain.
You know, I had a friend point out one time that when we are lying, we tend to fill out the story more, to provide more details. So if the more detailed and airtight our answer is, the more likely it is a lie.
Hmm.
So, you know,
And you mentioned that in your response to our friend on Facebook,
oh,
because there
did
was a
I?
lot of discussion around, well, I can say this, and I can say that, and I can say this. And you saw it was building into this elaborate structure. And that was your comment to the person.
Okay, yeah. And again, remember, I don't remember a lot of things. So I have that right here. I could look at it and I do remember that I responded.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what I'm understanding then is we have values. Sometimes values seem to be in conflict with one another. It's hard to uphold one value and another value simultaneously.
Right.
And so then we have to understand what each value is, and we have to understand the stakes that are involved,
Hmm.
and then we have to make a choice between our values.
Right.
And so even though I value honesty, do I deny my valuing honesty if I'm dishonest?
Hmm. Repeat that.
If I say that I value honesty,
Right.
but then I'm dishonest,
Right.
have I just invalidated my statement that I value honesty?
Some people would say yes. I get into this discussion with Scott. Scott, my husband Scott, would say yes, because he seems to value honesty above all other values? But I
Okay.
would say no, because you're saying I am still reflecting my value of honesty. It's just that as you really made a great point, Terry, of, values may be in conflict. And yes, I may value authenticity or discretion or meeting needs. That's that big umbrella we have sitting up there of meeting needs of my physical safety. And that's the Anne Frank example.
Yeah.
Physical safety overrides the value of honesty in that particular circumstance. And it
Well,
doesn't mean I'm not an honest person, doesn't mean I don't value honesty. It's just that safety was first and foremost at that point.
let me give a cultural example to kind of close us out, if I may.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
when I was in a country in Asia,
Mhm.
um, it's a very family-based culture, and um, so as we look at the values, in our own law, a spouse cannot be required to testify against a spouse.
Okay.
Okay. And but that privilege does not extend maybe to children
Right.
or to parents.
Right.
All right. So if I rob a bank
Mhm.
and I come home with the money
Right.
and my mom knows what I've done and the police come and say, did he rob the bank? And if she's on the witness stand and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth,
Mhm.
my mom would say, yes, that idiot did. Now, she would love me, but she would value honesty.
Okay.
All right. And yet, when I went to this other country, I found there was a clash between our cultural values
Hmm.
and theirs because they valued not shaming the family.
Okay. Right.
And so, if you went to the person in that scenario's mom,
Mhm.
she would say no,
Right.
and she would protect the integrity of the family,
Right.
from
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah.
To the point that if somebody is caught in something, it's an acceptable thing for them to jump off a roof
Wow.
and kill themselves
Wow.
because protecting the honor of the family is more important than the life of one individual.
Yeah.
Now, we wouldn't say that here, I don't
Mhm.
believe. So,
Right.
but what happens is so we look at it from outside and we say, well, these people lie. You can't even trust them.
Mhm.
But what's happening is they're using what I'll call an alternate judicial system.
Mm.
And so within the family, you better believe that person's taken care of.
Right.
And so, and it's quite possible that the punishment, if you will, from within the family, and I'm sorry I don't have an example of it, but that is can be more severe than what
Mm.
the
Authorities would do.
judicial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And I'll sort of close this out today as we, kind of finish talking about this subject. I think what you've raised is a great example of how it's contextual. It all depends on the circumstances.
Hmm.
And I think as we're looking at honesty, discretion, disclosure, authenticity, expression, there's not going to be a right answer.
Yeah.
And the answer that may be right for me may be completely wrong for you. And so, as people are navigating these really difficult decisions that they have to make about coming out and about disclosing or not disclosing and being honest and being safe, there's not going to be one path, and you may make a mistake. And, look, I think if someone later on says, well, you lied to me about that, then I think you sort of have to go back to them and say, well, I did the best I could at the time. And
Thank
I
you.
think as we're talking about this coming out process and everything, we have to extend grace to ourselves and recognize we will make mistakes. It will be difficult and we won't always know what to do. And we will do things and they may be right, they may be wrong, they may be right at the time, but not right later. And we just have to take a deep breath
Hmm.
and just accept that we're human and we're just working out things as best as we can.
Yes, and that doesn't mean we're not a moral person with integrity.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great point. And let's sort of close out with that thought of, just because you may do something that's not honest at that point, doesn't mean that you're not an honest person. We tend to want to be black and white on how we identify things, and that's just not how the world works.
Right.
So,
Now, usually though, you ask me for something profound and I have something. So
okay.
I'm just waiting for you to ask.
All right. Close us out. We got 2 minutes left. Close us out with something profound, my dearest.
Okay. I'm in a 12-step group that, a lot of different types.
Hmm.
And the one that I'm in, well, just about all, there's once we examine our lives
Hmm.
and we look at all of our good and all of our bad, and it's a step on the way to changing our lives.
Right.
There's a point where we look at our what we've put down as our life, and then we are honest with ourselves about it.
Hmm.
We pray and we're honest with our God about it.
With ourselves,
And
honest with our
then
God.
we're honest with one other human being.
Hmm.
We're honest with another human being, not every other human being. We don't have to tell the world, but we do need to get it off our chest.
Okay.
And we do need to find ways not to carry this secret or this burden all by ourselves.
Right.
So that person could be, depending on your circumstances, a trusted friend, a
Mhm.
mentor, somebody clergy, complete stranger that you'll never see again, so that they won't, you know. So
Sometimes
anyway,
they're the easiest ones to spill your guts to.
yeah.
But
So honest with yourself, honest with your God, and honest with another human being.
yeah, and I think that's a great way for us to close out this very
Yeah.
wishy-washy, mushy-mashy. That's not tech. That's like a 25-cent word for you there. The
Well,
penny
we are
word,
not going
mushy-mashy.
to, when we write our book and become famous, we are not going to use those words to describe aspects of our model, are we?
Possibly. We may need to. So with that, Terry, I
Okay.
appreciate
You didn't answer.
I said we may need to, so we'll see. But
Okay.
I appreciate being with you today, and I hope you have a great weekend. And I look forward to our next chat.
Well, thank you for all your great insights. I've learned today.
Yeah,
Have
me
a
too.
great day. I'm
Thanks.
still Terry.
And I'm Brian, and this is Queer Chat.